This episode of The Serialholic contains descriptions of disturbing graphic content which may be offensive to some people. Listener discretion is advised.
And serial killers and most killers in general have a dead conscience. Normal, ordinary people do not think like a serial killer. They have no conception of what is going through a killer's mind, how he operates. I think there is a divine force that is out there. I believe also there's a malevolent force that is out there. Then again, they could be one and the same. Death is death, and it is said that no man knows his own death.
Serial killers.
I'm not a big serial killer, by the way. Eight people, that's nothing.
Don't you dare touch me!
Murder.
I wouldn't let me go, no.
Because you kill again.
More than positive.
Mystery. I'm Dave Jari, and I am the Serialholic. One of the most recognizable features on a person is their teeth. Whether it's straight, crooked, white, yellow, well-kept, or rotting, it can be said it is the defining feature that most people are drawn to. You will remember a person if you see their discolored, rotting teeth. This was the case for 56-year-old Lillian Doy on the morning of May 14, 1985, in Monterey Park in California. On the 13th, she and her husband Bill, 66, went to a Ford dealership and put a down payment on a family van. They had already had a Jaguar and a Cadillac, but with Bill suffering a heart attack 3 years earlier and Lillian recovering from a stroke, they wanted a vehicle that would better accommodate the retirement plans. Later that evening, she and Bill had settled into bed when there was a disturbance coming from within the house. Before Bill had a chance to get his gun, a tall, lanky shadow had appeared in the bedroom. The shadowy figure raced in, shot Bill in the face, and turned his attention to Lillian. The man restrained the disabled Lillian with thumb cuffs, but was distracted with the noises coming from Bill. He was still alive. Bill was shot through the upper lip. The bullet shredded his tongue and lodged in the back of his throat. The man brutally beat Bill into unconsciousness, left him for dead, and went about ransacking the house. Before he left, he returned to Lillian and savagely raped her. And just as quickly as the man appeared, he was gone. Shortly after, a 911 call was received by dispatch. It was Bill, barely clinging to life. He couldn't speak. The only sounds the dispatcher heard was gasping for air and the sound of Bill gurgling on his own blood before he lost consciousness. Using their caller ID information, the dispatcher sent police to their address. When they arrived, they found Bill lying unconscious in the den, and Lillian was in the hallway with thumb cuffs still attached to her left hand. Bill died shortly after arriving at the hospital. When police questioned Lillian about the attack, she immediately described the man's teeth, some missing, others in a state of rapid decay. This was the same description, along with the murderer being a Hispanic with long, shaggy black hair, given by victims lucky enough to survive the attacks. By July of 1985, police felt confident with the consistency in the description and made a plea to the public to help identify this mystery man, first dubbed as the Valley Killer, and then more famously, the Night Stalker. To take a psychological look at how Richard Ramirez would become the Night Stalker, we need to start from the beginning. Born Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Richard was the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez's 5 children. His father was once a police officer in Juarez, Mexico, before coming to the United States to work as a laborer on the Santa Fe Railroad. Known for his fits of anger, Julian would take this rage out on the children and Mercedes. As for his mother, a kind, loving, devout Catholic who worked at a boot factory where safety was the least of the company's concerns. She was exposed to harmful chemical fumes while she was pregnant with her children, and all 5 of them had forms of birth defects, ranging from respiratory difficulty to bone deformities. As a young boy, Richard was an extroverted, happy child who loved to dance around and entertain his family, and his childhood friends recall Ramirez being friendly and popular. 2 major head injuries, one when a dresser fell on his head at the age of 2, requiring 30 stitches, and a second at the age of 5 when he was knocked unconscious by a park swing, would leave Richard experiencing violent seizures. As an adolescent, he wanted nothing more than to play football with his friends, but because of these seizures, his mother forbid it. Around the age of 9, it is believed Richard and his brother were being molested by a school teacher. This, coupled with his father's severe physical abuse, Richard began to withdraw. At the age of 11, he found solace in Miguel Ramirez, an older cousin and decorated Green Beret who had recently returned from the war in Vietnam. Richard spent countless hours with Miguel every day, and soon, Miguel introduced marijuana to Richard, taught him how to kill with stealth and skill, and began sharing pictures of Vietnamese women he had raped and killed during the war. These graphic pictures, including some with Miguel posing with a severed head, shaped young Richard's sexual development during his pubescent stage. He now associated violence with sexual gratification, and Richard would find himself aroused by these images. On May 4th, 1973, 13-year-old Richard was present when Miguel and his girlfriend got into a violent argument and Miguel shot her in the face. Richard was so close, blood had sprayed on his face and body. He became withdrawn from his family and friends after this murder, and he would begin escaping from home to sleep in a cemetery. Later that year, Richard moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. Roberto was an obsessive voyeur and would begin bringing Richard with him to peep into people's windows. High school classmates remember Ramirez, who had changed into a troublemaker who took great pride in showing off his burglary skills, often pickpocketing the money out of pockets and purses from fellow classmates and teachers. He was going into homes with people still in the house just to prove he could walk about without being noticed. There were a rash of break-ins throughout the neighborhood, and while many people suspected it was Ramirez, nobody could prove it. They also noticed another significant change: his personal hygiene. He rarely brushed his teeth, and people would comment about the foul odor that would emit from his mouth as his teeth were beginning to rot. Shortly after turning 17, Ramirez had quit school and, because of his excessive truancy, had failed to ever make it past a 9th grade education. He began working at a local hotel, and he would take advantage of his access to the rooms to steal from the guests. He was fired after a guest of the hotel came back to his room and found Ramirez attempting to rape his wife. Ramirez was arrested after being severely beaten by the man. However, charges were dropped because the man and the wife were from out of state and failed to return for the court hearings. Ramirez never held another job, but he also never went without, as he would steal whatever he needed from stores and people's homes. After run-ins with police for marijuana possession and receiving a 50-day suspended sentence for petty theft, Ramirez left El Paso for the San Francisco Bay in 1980. Ramirez's stay in San Francisco was brief, only about 4 months, but he bounced frequently from place to place throughout other areas of the Bay until 1983. While there, he roomed with a man who would later say that it was known Ramirez could not be trusted. Personal items would mysteriously disappear, but he was never called out on it because of the fear factor. Ramirez was obsessed with guns and knives, he would say. Ramirez would frequently travel back and forth between Los Angeles and San Francisco over the course of 1983 through 1985, with periodic trips back to his hometown in El Paso. Although a friend would say that Ramirez had no steady income, She claims he would take a plane in between the cities, meaning that his robberies were becoming more frequent and profitable. He also began using cocaine, and his belief in Satanism, which first stemmed during his time with his brother-in-law Roberto, was becoming more prominent. After a stint in prison in Los Angeles for auto theft, the city would be stricken with fear as they were about to be introduced to the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez would not become your typical serial killer. His surge from petty theft to cold-blooded killer was not triggered because he was scorned by an ex-girlfriend, as some suggest with Ted Bundy. Nor did he have mother issues like Ed Kemper and Michael Ross. Ramirez is what they call a disorganized killer, a sociopath who rapes and kills on a whim when his bloodlust peaks. His murders were not planned out, and many occurred simply because the victims were home when he decided to rob them, or because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Ramirez also had no consistent victimology. His victims transcended sex and ethnicity. The reign of the Night Stalker began in Glassell Park on June 28, 1984. Jack Vincow would visit his mother nearly every day, as he lived in the apartment just above hers. However, on this day, things appeared to be a bit off. When Jack arrived, he noticed that the window was wide open in the living room and the screen was pushed in. He also noticed that the front door was left unlocked. When he entered the home, the living room was in disarray as if someone had ransacked it. Calling out to his mother with no response, he pressed in further. Lying on the bed, he found his mother, 79-year-old Jenny Vincow. He rushed to her and quickly found that she was dead, with her throat slashed clean through, nearly decapitating her. Jack ran out of the home and called police. Upon their arrival, it was discovered that in addition to the obvious neck injury, she received stab wounds to her upper chest, arms, legs, and defensive wounds to her hands. Jenny was raped and was left for dead with her dress lifted over her waist and her girdle torn and pulled down to her ankles. The final moments of her life were lived in horror. Police were baffled as to who would do this to an elderly woman, but as the months passed by, they would realize that their work into finding her killer would take a spiraling, horrific path. Nearly a full 10 months would pass, and the police were no closer to finding Jenny's killer when the Night Stalker struck again. 1985 would become the year of the Night Stalker, when his attacks would become so frequent, some would occur on the same day. At 11:30 p.m. on March 17th in the LA suburb of Rosemead, 21-year-old Maria Hernandez arrived at her upscale condo. She drove into her garage, exited her car, and approached the entrance to her condo. Maria explains the rest in her testimony.
As I approached the side door in the garage, I heard something behind me. I turned and saw a tall man dressed in black with a blue AC/DC hat pulled low on his head. He appeared to be Hispanic. He came rushing at me, pointing a gun at my face. When he was about a foot away, I raised my hands to defend myself just as he fired. I felt a cross between pain and heat rushing through my right hand, and I fell to the ground and just laid there. He opened the door to the condo and pushed my body behind it. When he was inside, I got up and ran out of the garage. I stumbled and fell as I ran to the front of the building. That's when I heard a loud boom noise. I then saw the same man exit through the front door. I hid behind a car, but he noticed me and pointed the gun at me again. I cried, "Please don't shoot me again." He put the gun down and ran away. I stayed there until I heard a car screech away. I went into the front door of the condo calling out Dale's name, but she didn't respond. I walked into the kitchen, and that's when I saw her. I bent down on my knees and I wanted to see if she was still alive, but she was gone. She was gone.
Dale was Maria's roommate, 34-year-old Dale Okazaki. Dale had heard a loud bang from inside the garage and approached the door Maria usually walks through. When she got to the kitchen, the man burst through the side door and Dale quickly hid behind the counter. But it was too late. The man saw Dale, approached her, and held the pistol directly against her head, pulling the trigger. She died instantly. Although Dale wasn't raped, her body was accosted as she was found with her blouse pulled up over her shoulders, apparently so Ramirez could fondle her breasts. Maria was fortunate not to suffer the same fate because when she raised her hands to defend herself, she was holding her car keys in her right hand, which deflected the bullet. You would hope that this hell of a night would come to an end, but about 10 minutes later in Monterey Park, 30-year-old Tsai Leon Yu, known to her friends as Veronica, was driving home from her friend's house after spending the evening joking around and sharing childhood memories. A vehicle was driving erratically behind her. Veronica allowed the car to pass, which then, now in front of her, came to an abrupt stop. A man, later identified by a witness as Ramirez, exited his vehicle and approached Veronica, dragging her from the car. Ramirez then shot her twice in the chest before fleeing the scene. Veronica attempted to crawl away before collapsing. She was still alive when police arrived, but died shortly after. It was later confirmed at the autopsies of Dale and Veronica that they were both shot with the same .22 caliber pistol. Less than a month later, in the morning of March 27, 1985, Peter Zazzara, the son of 64-year-old Vincent, a retired investment counselor who now owned a pizzeria, had arrived to visit his father. Peter knocked and rang the doorbell repeatedly before noticing the door was unlocked. When he entered, he found the house ransacked. He located his father deceased in a den from a gunshot to the temple. Vincent's wife, 44-year-old Maxine, was found in the bedroom, her body stretched out and naked. She was shot in the head as well, but that wasn't all. Her eyes were gouged out of the sockets, and she had been stabbed repeatedly in the face, neck, breast, abdomen, and groin area. All the stabbing was done post-mortem, and there were signs of rape. May 14, 1985 brought the murder of Bill Doy and the rape of Lillian as discussed in Chapter 1. On May 29th, Ramirez arrived at the home of sisters Mabel Bell, 83, and 81-year-old Florence Lang, who also went by the names of Malville Keller and Blanche Wolfe, respectively. After finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned both women and used a frayed electrical cord to electrocute Mabel. He then moved on to Florence, who was disabled. He savagely raped her and then used Mabel's lipstick to draw a pentagram on Florence's thighs as well as the walls in both bedrooms. The women were found comatose, but alive, 2 days later. However, Mabel soon succumbed to her injuries. On July 2nd, Ramirez randomly selected a home to rob belonging to a widowed grandmother named Mary Cannon. After breaking in, Ramirez found Mary sleeping in her bed. He bludgeoned her with a lamp from her bedside before working his way through her house. He returned to the unconscious Mary and repeatedly stabbed her with a 10-inch butcher knife from the kitchen, killing her. July 5th brought Ramirez to the home of the Bennett family in Sierra Madre, California. Inside, he found 16-year-old Whitney Bennett asleep in her bed. Ramirez beat Whitney in the head with a tire iron, and when he failed to find a knife in the kitchen, he returned to her room and strangled her with an electrical cord. The cord began to emit sparks, and Whitney gasped for air. Ramirez stopped, believing that Jesus Christ saved her. Whitney survived, but required nearly 500 stitches to close the gaping wounds in her head. Now back in Monterey Park on July 7th, Ramirez broke into the home of 61-year-old Joyce Nelson. He found her asleep on a couch and then proceeded to beat her with his fists and kicking her in the head, killing her before robbing her home. He stomped Joyce so hard, he left a shoe print on her face. That same night, Ramirez entered the home of 63-year-old Sophie Dickman. He attempted to beat and rape her prior to robbing the home. Before leaving, he made Sophie swear to Satan that there were no other valuables in the house. On July 20th, Ramirez purchased a machete before breaking into the Glendale home of Maxon and Leila Needing. He rushed into their bedroom and began hacking them with his machete. He attempted to shoot them, but the gun had jammed. With both Maxon and Leila pleading for their life, Ramirez cleared the gun and then shot them both in the head. After stealing property from the home, Ramirez returned to the deceased couple and further mutilated their bodies with the machete. He immediately pawned the merchandise from the Needing home, and at 4:15 that same morning, broke into the home of Chanarong and Samkid Kavanath. He immediately killed Chanarong by shooting him in the head while he was asleep, and he beat Samkid. After discovering their 8-year-old son, Ramirez bound the young boy before returning to Samkid. He repeatedly raped her and forced her to perform oral sex next to her dead husband. He dragged her throughout the house, demanding she show him where the valuables were, then disappeared into the night. August of 1985 would pick up right where July left off. After Chris and Virginia Peterson both survived gunshot wounds to their heads by the hands of Ramirez on August 6th, Ramirez was now at the home belonging to 31-year-old Elias and his 27-year-old wife, Sakina Abawath, at approximately 2:30 a.m. on August 8th. Ramirez entered the master bedroom and killed Elias with a bullet to the head. He grabbed Sakina and demanded she show him where they keep the valuables. After collecting the items, Ramirez sodomized Sakina, and while doing so, their 3-year-old son entered the room. Ramirez tied the boy up and then continued to rape Sakina. By now, Richard Ramirez was fully aware of the media coverage his crimes were generating. After the murder of Elias Abawath, Ramirez left Los Angeles and returned to San Francisco. You would think he would lay low, now that numerous descriptions and composite drawings have been distributed, but think again. On August 18th, he broke into the home of Peter and Barbara Pan. He immediately shot and killed 66-year-old Peter before moving on to beat and rape 62-year-old Barbara. When he was finished raping her, he shot her in the head and left her for dead. Unbeknownst to Ramirez, the police were collecting some valuable evidence that could be used to connect the crime scenes. For example, the bullets from all the crime scenes could be traced back to the same gun. And let us not forget about the shoe print, the one that was left on Joyce Nelson's face, and now at the crime scene of Peter and Barbara Pan. The police had tracked this particular shoe print and found that it was a newer style of Avia tennis shoe, and they were only sold at certain stores. This was evidence that was kept from the public, that is, until San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein disclosed it to the media. Ramirez saw this on the news and immediately went to the Golden Gate Bridge and tossed the sneakers over the side. Now feeling the heat in San Francisco, he was making his way back to Los Angeles when he stopped on August 24th at a home belonging to James Romero. The family had just returned from a vacation to Mexico earlier, and Romero's 13-year-old son was still awake at the time Ramirez was staking out the house. Hearing a noise outside, the son ran to his parents' bedroom and told them of the prowler. James ran outside just in time to catch a glimpse of the make, model, and color of the car Ramirez fled in, as well as a partial plate number. But not to be deterred, Ramirez then approached the home of Bill Carnes and his fiancée Inez Erickson. He broke in and found the sleeping couple in their room. Bill was awakened by the sound of Ramirez loading a bullet in the chamber. Within an instant, Bill was shot 3 times in the head, and Ramirez turned his attention to Inez. He bound her with neckties he found from the closet, and then after robbing the home, he raped and sodomized her. As he was leaving, he told her, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." After he left, she untied herself and ran to a neighbor's house for help. Emergency personnel were able to rush Bill to the hospital in time to save his life. Inez was able to give the police a detailed description of Ramirez, including his disgusting, rotting teeth, as well as a description of the vehicle he was driving. On August 28th, police in Los Angeles found the abandoned vehicle and were able to get a fingerprint, which came back belonging to Ricardo Ramirez. Police now had a name for the Night Stalker. They distributed his picture to all of the media outlets, and because Ramirez was in Arizona visiting his brother, he was unaware of the new discovery. On August 31st, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles. When he walked into a convenience store upon his return, he failed to notice stacks of newspapers on the racks outside. It wasn't until he looked out the window and saw a group of elderly women fearfully pointing him out to a police officer, saying, "El Matador," which translates to "the killer," that he realized that it was his face on the cover of those newspapers. He ran in a panic. After crossing the freeway, he attempted to steal a car but was quickly thwarted by bystanders. He then ran approximately 2 miles, jumping fences and down city alleyways. He attempted to steal another car but was attacked by people on the street, who profusely beat him with a metal pipe until police arrived. This marked the end of the Night Stalker. At his arraignment, Richard Ramirez entered the courtroom and yelled, "Hail Satan!" But no religious belief was going to help him. Ramirez was charged with 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. He was convicted on all counts and was sentenced to death. He died on June 13, 2013, from complications of B-cell lymphoma.
Big deal. That's always went with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland.
There is another part of this story that wasn't known until 2009. It was the murder on April 10, 1984, of 9-year-old Mei Liang. She was living in the same residential hotel as Ramirez in the Tenderloin district in San Francisco. He raped and beat the young girl and hung her from a pipe in the basement. DNA evidence confirmed that Ramirez was her killer. In 2016, previously unknown DNA evidence was processed and determined that a second suspect was present at her rape and murder. But because the suspect was a juvenile at the time, his information was never made public, and charges will not be filed due to insufficient evidence. It is Ramirez's only known crime in which he had an accomplice. This episode of Serialholic was written and produced by me, Dave Jari. Please follow me at theserialholic.com, where you can read my profile, connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and chat with me on Messenger. As always, stay tuned for more episodes, and thank you for being a Serialholic.